2 years ago, China had 12 million electric vehicles on the road. Now they have even more. If America doesn't do this, 20 years from now, we'll all be driving Chinese cars and Chinese buses.
Yeah.
If America doesn't do this now.
Yeah. So we opened an office in Boulder. We were just there actually at the lunch hour. We have a couple dozen volunteers today making phone calls, knocking on doors. We have about 3,000 volunteers who are doing the same across the state. You know, Boulder plays obviously an especially important role in the Democratic primary, and both Boulder and Broomfield are critical counties in the general election. I was proud to win the county assembly in Boulder and in Broomfield, and to win the state convention, which was held in Broomfield this year. And I think the more folks learn about my platform, my record, my agenda, our campaign, the more likely they are to sign up. That's one of the reasons we doubled our lead between the precinct caucuses in March and the county assemblies in April. In fact, we switched Boulder County. Boulder went for the other fellow by a narrow margin in March, and then we took the assembly by a significant margin in April. You know, and some of the differences, I think, between us are emerging. The Senate of the United States had a chance just a few weeks ago to end tax breaks for the oil and gas industry and use about $35 billion in savings to invest in energy efficiency and energy conservation and efforts like these, and to reduce the deficit. And my opponent voted no. A majority of the U.S. Senate voted no. The majority of the U.S. Senate also happens to be subsidized by the oil and gas industry. In fact, the fellow I'm running against has rocketed to the number 2 spot among Democrats in the Senate on the ballot this year as recipients of big oil money. That's a competition I don't aim to win. It's a conflict of interest.
And in terms of your opponent's funding from that industry, where does that rank? Is it a pretty significant part of?
Well, he's taken more than $1 million from special interest groups. This is a matter of public record, including making his way into the top 10 list among big oil money beneficiaries. All but 2 senators on that list, by the way, all but 2 senators on big oil's top 10 friends are Republicans. The only 2 who aren't are Blanche Lincoln and Michael Bennet. I don't take any corporate cash because I never want to have to pick between doing what's right for my constituents or what might be profitable for my corporate contributors. And I'm happy to learn about companies like these that here at Boulder Electric Vehicle that are helping save the planet and potentially create hundreds of jobs for the state. But if you take money from insurance companies, drug companies, big Wall Street banks, big oil, it becomes very difficult to bite the hand that feeds you. It's one of the reasons, not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons we haven't seen more progress on climate change. In fact, it's been more than a year now since the House took up climate change legislation and passed a proposal. The Senate has done nothing of the kind. The Senate is the place where good ideas go to die.
And in terms of Boulder County, Broomfield County Democrats, Andrew, what stances or positions that you have do you think particularly appeal to them, particularly speak to them? And again, I'm using a broad brush here, but
I'd say 2. One, I mean, the economy is job one, and this is one of the reasons we're here, is because we're learning about a place that can create 700 jobs in this state now if we have, as Carter was saying, if we have the political will. We have the technology, we have the brain power, we have the resources. You know, Colorado is obviously a source of a great deal of sun and wind and biomass and geothermal potential, and there's no reason on earth, literally, not to do what these folks are proposing and want to do. And if you can get a job on an assembly line in this plant for $25 or $30 an hour, you're in better shape, certainly than you are now, if you're unemployed. And more than 200,000 Coloradans are unemployed. And the average length of stay now for jobless Americans is 35 weeks. Senate, by the way, went home on vacation without extending unemployment benefits. So they're on holiday. They're taking a break, while most Americans can't because they need to feed their families. And that's a real struggle. So I think the agenda that we've laid out, ending tax breaks for companies that ship jobs overseas, negotiating and enforcing trade agreements that give American workers a fair shot, making it easier for small businesses to get access to credit and capital, investing in education. And one of the reasons this plant is here is because there's an educated workforce to draw from, including the brain power of the folks who started it. So I think investing in education is probably the best economic development strategy ever invented. And I'd also tell you what appeals, I believe, not just to voters in Broomfield and Boulder, not just to Democrats, but to most Americans, is the goal we've laid out to revolutionize America's energy policy. This is our Sputnik moment. If we don't seize this opportunity to reduce our reliance to fossil fuel, to end our addiction to that energy source, and accelerate our transition to renewables, we never will. You know, the tragedy in the Gulf, the worst economic, environmental catastrophe in American history, should jolt Americans into action, just as Sputnik did in 1957 when the Soviets beat us to space. President Kennedy launched an Apollo program to put a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth. We need a new Apollo program of energy independence, and we ought to be harnessing the best efforts in the public and private sector. We ought to be steering lots of folks, as President Kennedy's courage did, into careers in science and technology and engineering and math, so that we can live in a world or pass on to our children a world where they no longer have to spoil their oceans or foul their skies or spill their blood just to power their planet. We can get there, but we need to act now.
And lastly, Andrew, do you feel that your performance at the assembly a couple of months ago, how does that reflect on the local Democratic feeling here in Boulder County in particular, in terms of your candidacy? Do you think that was kind of a macrocosm of these two counties?
I do feel like we've been gaining momentum at each stage in Boulder and Broomfield and around the state. And we went from 8 points up in March, 16 points up in April, 21 points up in May. So the more information people get, the more likely they are to sign on. And I think that will put us in good shape, not just for the primary, which I expect to win, but also the general election, because the message we're delivering and the leadership I bring appeals to Democrats and Republicans and independents. Most folks I talk to around the state tell me, I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, I just want you to get something done. And what they see instead in Washington, D.C. is a Congress, a Senate in particular, that is paralyzed, where the two parties are polarized, where politicians spend more time pointing fingers at one another and picking fights than solving problems. And it's not, I will tell you, as if there's a shortage of problems to solve. I mean, it's hard to imagine a time when there were so many areas of public policy in such disrepair. I told somebody the other day, I thought President Obama had inherited the worst mess of any president in American history, but I got corrected. They said Lincoln. So maybe the second worst. And the trouble is, and one thing we've learned in the last year and a half is, it's not enough just to put a president of real courage and talent and vision in the White House if the same qualities aren't matched at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue.
Thank you.
You're welcome.